The condescending laughter of the Cardassian General Antares would soon turn to agonized screams as the frail-looking human he mocked, John Bennett, beat the smug alien into a bloody broken mess. Bennett nursed his whiskey in a dimly lit dive bar nestled deep within a remote space station, wishing he could drink away the bitter memories of the Arcturan War. His pallid, grizzled reflection in the dingy bar window mirrored the wretched hive of alien scum and villainy surrounding him. Suddenly a group of Cardassian soldiers burst into the bar, with ear-splitting laughter and pompous boasting. They celebrated yet another bloody triumph over an innocent world, crowing about how their mighty empire would soon conquer the galaxy. Bennett stared into his drink, silently grinding his teeth as the obnoxious aliens cavorted around him. He'd seen firsthand the atrocities these Cardassian bastards were capable of back in the Arcturan War. Ignoring them was the smart play. Don't draw attention. Don't provoke them. But then their smug, preening General Antares swaggered up behind Bennett's bar stool with a leering grin. Well, what do we have here, boys? A puny human soldier drowning his sorrows in cheap booze. The Cardassian lackeys guffawed and hooted at their master's wit. Bennett sipped his whiskey, using every ounce of self-control not to break the glass, and jammed the jagged end into the scaly alien's eye socket. Antares took Bennett's silence as an invitation to keep taunting. You humans are so weak and pathetic. You really think you stand a chance against the Cardassian Empire? We'll grind your kind to dust beneath our boots. Bennett clenched his jaw and slowly stood, looking Antares dead in the eyes. The other Cardassians reached for their blasters. Antares waved them off with a contemptuous snort. I don't want to fight, Bennett spoke low and rough, but if you keep pushing me, I'll have to put you in your goddamn place. Antares roared with laughter, his mocking guffaws echoing through the now silent bar. Oh, the rickety old human is going to put me in my place. This I have to see. Antares turned to his men. When I'm done wiping the floor with this bag of brittle bones, we can all take turns pissing on his corpse. The Cardassians howled at that. Bennett pushed past them and walked out without another word. No point talking to idiots. He'd let his fists do the talking. After all, Antares had just made the worst mistake of his soon-to-be brutally shortened life. Out in the dimly lit corridor, John ducks into a shadowed corner and activates his wrist communicator. Command, this is Bennett. He speaks in a low, urgent voice. I've made contact with the target, General Antares, requesting extraction and debriefing. The voice on the other end crackles with static, but the response is clear. Negative, Bennett. Your mission is not yet complete. We need you to gather more intel on the Cardassians' military strategies and weaknesses. Maintain your cover and keep a close eye on Antares. We believe he may be the key to bringing down their empire. John sighs heavily, the weight of his task settling on his shoulders. He knew this mission would be difficult, but he never anticipated just how much he would come to despise that arrogant Cardassian general. As John makes his way back to his quarters, his mind races. He needs to find a way to get closer to Antares, to gain his trust and gather the information Earth desperately needs. But how? Suddenly alarms blare throughout the station, red lights flashing. John's instincts kick in and he races towards the commotion, heart pounding. Rounding a corner, he skids to a halt, eyes widening at the sight before him. A group of heavily armed mercenaries have their weapons trained on a cowering Cardassian soldier. And there at the center of it all stands General Antares, face twisted in fury and indignation. John knows he has only seconds to act. He reaches for his own weapon, mind calculating the best way to take down the mercenaries and save the Cardassian soldier. But as he moves to intervene, a thought occurs to him. This could be the opportunity he's been waiting for, a chance to prove his worth to Antares and get closer to completing his mission. John hesitates, finger hovering over the trigger of his blaster. The choice he makes now could change the course of the war, the fate of the galaxy. John sprang into action, blaster firing rapid shots as he charged towards the mercenaries threatening Antares. The surprised mercs scattered, panicked shots flying wildly off target. John seized their confusion, blasting them down one after another with cold, ruthless precision. In moments their bodies lay strewn across the floor, a grim display of Jon's lethal skill. Jon met Antares' glare, his own eyes hard as steel, breath heavy from the fight. "You're wrong, General," he growled, voice low and dangerous. "I'm not weak, I'm not pathetic, and I sure as hell won't stand by while innocents die." The Cardassian soldier stared at Jon, eyes wide with fear and gratitude. Jon turned to him, voice softening slightly. "You all right?" The soldier nodded, trembling. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved my life." Jon gave a curt nod, then faced Antares again. "This is what we do, General," he declared, conviction ringing in every word. "We protect the innocent, whatever it takes, and we'll never stop fighting for what's right." Antares spun away, face twisted with rage and humiliation, lackeys scurrying after him like whipped dogs. Jon watched them go, a small flicker of satisfaction in his chest. He knew it was just the start, with many battles still ahead. But for now, he'd won this fight. And that would do. Heading back to his quarters, Jon's thoughts raced, already planning his next move. He had to get closer to Antares somehow, earn his trust, and uncover the intel needed to take down the Cardassian Empire for good. But he couldn't do it alone. He'd need allies, human, alien, anyone willing to join the cause. Anyone. Renewed determination hardened Jon's resolve as he set out to build a coalition that would reshape the galaxy's fate. Jon and Antares clashed in a whirlwind of slashing blades and brutal strikes, their vicious duel raging in the heart of the besieged Cardassian supply depot. Sparks flew as their weapons collided again and again with bone-jarring force. Around them, the cavernous chamber erupted into chaos as Jon's rebel forces battled fiercely against the General's elite guard. Blaster bolts sizzled through the air, and explosions rocked the deck plates. Screams of pain and war cries echoed off the bulkheads. The acrid stench of scorched metal and burnt flesh choked their lungs. But Jon hardly registered the pandemonium swirling around him. His entire focus narrowed to the deadly dance he and Antares engaged in. Parry, riposte, counterstrike, over and over, with blinding speed. Something was wrong, though. Jon could feel it. Antares matched him blow for blow, anticipating his every feint and slash with uncanny precision. It was like the Cardassian knew Jon's moves before he even made them. Suddenly the terrible realization slammed into Jon like a punch to the gut. Antares had been studying him, analyzing his every strength and weakness, searching for vulnerabilities to exploit, and now the General had found them. With a triumphant bellow, Antares launched a devastating flurry of strikes that battered through Jon's defenses and sent him staggering back, his blade flying from his grip. Antares pounced, weapon raised to deliver the killing blow. Jon scrambled desperately for his sword, but before either he or Antares could move, a blur of motion flashed between them. Grek appeared from nowhere, throwing himself in front of Jon. Antares's blade punched through the Torlaxian's armor as if it were paper, running him through. Grek crumpled to the deck, dark blood pooling around his limp form. "No!" The anguished howl tore from Jon's throat. Blinding rage and grief crashed over him in a red wave. He snatched up Grek's fallen sword and hurled himself at Antares in a berserk fury, their blades crashing together in a spray of sparks. Tears blurred Jon's vision as he hammered at Antares in a relentless onslaught, driving the Cardassian back with the sheer savagery of his attack. His muscles burned and his lungs heaved, but still he pressed forward, raining down blows with merciless force. Antares gave ground step by step, his eyes widening in alarm as he struggled to counter Jon's wild swings. And then, spotting an opening, Jon lunged in one last desperate thrust, ramming his blade to the hilt in the General's chest. Shock and agony flooded Antares' face. He staggered back, legs crumpling as he slid off Jon's gore-slicked sword and collapsed in a spreading pool of blood. Jon stood over his vanquished foe, gulping air, adrenaline still surging through his veins. As the battle haze slowly faded, he looked down into Antares' dying eyes, the General's gaze still seething with hate, even as the life drained out of him. With a final rattling gasp, Antares went limp. John swayed on his feet, emotionally and physically spent. He turned to his battered rebel band, their faces etched with mingled triumph and sorrow. "It's not over," he rasped, exhaustion roughening his voice. "Not yet, we've still got a job to do." With grim resolve, he led his troops onward, deeper into the Cardassian stronghold, steeling himself for the trials to come. John and his battered rebel squad sliced deeper into the Cardassian stronghold, blasting and hacking their way through the enemy troops who fought with ferocious desperation to avenge General Antares' death. Outnumbered and outgunned, the human-led strike team should have been overwhelmed, but John's leadership and tenacity kept them in the fight. "Push forward," John roared over the din of battle, unleashing precise bursts from his pulse rifle that cut down Cardassian after Cardassian. "We're not leaving until this base is rubble." His soldiers rallied behind him, hurling grenades and thermal charges that blasted smoking craters in the deck plates. Bulkheads buckled, and control panels burst apart in showers of sparks as the rebels advanced inexorably. During the brutal room-to-room fighting, they uncovered a chilling revelation: schematics for a planet-killing Cardassian superweapon nearing completion. Entire worlds, billions of lives, would be erased in an instant if the Empire unleashed this monstrosity. "We have to destroy this thing," John growled, his blood running cold at the terrifying implications. "No matter the cost, it can't be allowed to exist." Just then, a Cardassian in scorched, battle-damaged armor emerged from the smoke with his hands raised. John trained his rifle on the alien's chest, finger tightening on the trigger. "Wait!" the Cardassian called. "My name is Kalik. I served under Antares, but I can't stomach the Empire's atrocities anymore. I want to help you destroy the weapon." John hesitated, instincts screaming not to trust him, but something in Kalik's eyes, a haunted weariness, convinced John to lower his gun. "Fine, but if you betray us—" Kalik shook his head. "I won't, you have my word." As the fight raged on, Kalik proved true to his pledge, battling alongside the rebels and saving John's life when a Cardassian soldier nearly gunned him down from behind. United by grim purpose, John and Kalik spearheaded the final push towards the superweapons control center. They blasted through the fortified doors to find the room guarded by a hulking, heavily armed battle droid that shrugged off their weapons fire like raindrops. The metal monstrosity hammered the rebels with punishing cannon pulses and micro-seekers, forcing them to dive desperately for cover. John gritted his teeth, racking his brain for a solution. Then he spotted it, a hairline fracture in the droid's armored carapace, a structural weakness. "Kalik!" he shouted. "Draw its fire! I'm going to hit that weak point!" Kalik nodded and dashed from cover, peppering the droid with blaster shots. As it swiveled to return fire, John leapt from concealment and hurled a plasma grenade with pinpoint accuracy. The explosive sailed through the air and lodged in the crack, detonating in a blinding flash. The droid staggered as the blast tore through its internal systems, smoke pouring from ruptured conduits. Seizing his chance, John unloaded his rifle into the gaping hole, overloading the power core. With a final shuddering groan, the battle droid toppled over and exploded into scrap. Racing to the control console, John and Kalik skidded to a halt before the complex security system locking down the superweapon. Kalik's fingers flew across the keypad, drawing on his knowledge of Cardassian technology to hack through the safeguards and initiate the self-destruct sequence. Alerts blared and crimson light strobed as the weapon began to overload, an ominous rumbling building beneath their feet. John and Kalik exchanged a look of grim triumph. They'd done it. But as they turned to make their escape, a cold, mechanized voice rang out, "Halt, rebel scum!" A furious Cardassian commander stood in the doorway, flanked by a squad of elite soldiers in jet-black armor. He leveled his disruptor pistol at John's head with a sneer of pure malice. "Surrender, and your deaths will be swift," the commander growled. "Resist, and you will suffer greatly before the end." John and Kalik tensed, hands tightening on their weapons as they faced down the Cardassians. The moment seemed to freeze, stretched taut and humming with menace. Then, moving as one, John and Kalik dove to the sides as disruptor bolts scorched the air where they'd stood a heartbeat before. They unleashed a hail of answering fire, scything through the black-armored soldiers in a storm of blood and sparks. The commander roared with rage and charged at John, his disruptor spitting crimson death. John rolled and came up in a crouch, pulse rifle barking. The shot struck the commander's shield and dissipated in flares of blue energy. Cursing, John backpedaled, firing steadily. The commander closed in, lashing out with his pistol in a vicious swipe that caught John across the cheek and knocked him sprawling. His weapon clattered away as he hit the deck. The commander loomed over him, disruptor leveled at his skull. "Pathetic human," he spat. "You and your kind will never defeat the Cardassian Empire. We will grind your precious Earth to dust and enslave your people." John's eyes flashed with defiant fire. He surged to his feet and lunged inside the commander's guard, grappling for the disruptor. The two struggled for control, smashing against the bulkheads. With a heave of desperate strength, John wrenched the disruptor free and jammed the barrel under the commander's chin. "You're wrong," he snarled, his voice cold as vacuum. "We will defeat you. Your empire's reign of terror ends today." He pulled the trigger. The disruptor bolt punched through the commander's skull and blew out the back of his head in a spray of gore. With the Cardassian commander lying dead at his feet, John turned to Kalik and shouted over the blaring alarms, "We have to get the hell out of here before this whole damn place blows." Kalik nodded grimly, his face streaked with sweat and grime. Together they raced through the shuddering corridors of the doomed stronghold, the flashing emergency lights painting their desperate flight in hellish red strobes. Around every corner, down every passageway, Cardassian soldiers fought to the last to stop their escape, pouring disruptor fire and lobbing grenades with reckless abandon. John and Kalik returned fire as they ran, dropping the enemy troops with precise headshots and tossing thermal detonators to clear their path. Explosions rocked the structure, sending geysers of flame and shrapnel whipping through the air. Bulkheads buckled and deck plates cratered under the onslaught. John and Kalik leaped over the burning debris, never slowing, never stopping. 2 minutes, maybe less," John shouted back, consulting his wrist chrono. The digits counted down with merciless speed, each second an eternity. As they neared the exit, a heavily armed Cardassian kill team took up position to block their escape, pouring a withering fusillade at the charging humans. John and Kalik skidded into cover behind a mound of blasted rubble, the incoming fire pinging and sparking off the jagged edges. John blind-fired around the barricade, but the Cardassians kept up their relentless barrage, forcing him back down. Precious seconds hemorrhaged away, draining with the unstoppable force of an arterial wound. "Damn it, we're running out of time," John snarled, slamming a fresh power cell into his rifle. Kalik gripped his shoulder. "John, you have to go. Warn the Alliance. I'll hold them off." "The hell you will," John growled. "We're both getting out of here." Kalik shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "You said it yourself, there's no time. The galaxy needs you, John. It needs a hero." John opened his mouth to argue, but the look in Kalik's eyes, that unflinching resolve, stopped the words in his throat. With an anguished grimace, he clasped the Cardassian's hand. With that, John burst from cover, laying down a blistering, suppressive fire. The Cardassians ducked and scattered, thrown off balance by the ferocity of his assault. "Now, Kalik, go!" John roared, never letting up his punishing fusillade. Kalik sprinted from concealment, zigging and zagging through the enemy fire as he made for the exit. Disruptor bolts sizzled the air around him and chewed up the ground at his heels, but he never slowed, never faltered. Just as Kalik reached the door, a strangled cry of pain knifed through the cacophony of battle. He whirled to see John staggering, his body jerking as multiple blaster shots slammed into him. For a fraction of a second that felt like forever, their eyes met across the war-torn distance. In that infinite instant, a lifetime of understanding passed between them, of friendship, of sacrifice, of a bond deeper than blood. Then John was falling, crashing to the unyielding metal, his rifle clattering from his hands, and Kalik was turning away, tears cutting through the grime on his face as he hurled himself through the portal into the smoke-choked night. Outside, rebel soldiers swarmed around Kalek, hustling him onto a waiting transport. As the first terrible tremors shook the dying stronghold, he looked back just once, a final salute to the friend he'd left behind. Then the ship was lifting off, the engines roaring like an avenging god, and behind them, the Cardassian installation erupted in a world-shattering conflagration, the detonation of the terrible weapon drowning out all other sound as it consumed itself in an apocalyptic blast. In the sudden ringing silence that followed, Kalek slumped back in his acceleration chair, his heart cleaved in two. Around him, the other rebels pounded his back and gripped his shoulders, thanking him for completing the mission, for saving untold billions. But Kalek barely heard their accolades. His mind reeled with the enormity of what had happened, of what he'd lost. John was gone, sacrificed on the altar of duty and necessity, and nothing would ever be the same. As the transport knifed through the star-flecked void, bearing Kalek and the precious intelligence back to the rebel headquarters, he closed his eyes and whispered a silent oath. He would not let John's death be in vain. He would take up the fight, carry on the crusade against the Cardassian tyranny, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. It was the least he could do, to honor the memory of the human who had saved his life and changed his world, the man who had taught him the true meaning of courage and sacrifice. The hero named John Bennett. As the news of the rebels' stunning victory over the Cardassian stronghold spreads like wildfire across the galaxy, countless worlds erupt in celebration. The downtrodden and oppressed masses, so long crushed beneath the boot heel of Cardassian tyranny, look to the rebels as shining beacons of hope in a sea of darkness. One such new recruit is a young Cardassian named Zek. Sickened by the cruelty and brutality of his own people, Zek reaches out to Kalek, offering to act as a spy within the enemy's ranks. At first, Kalek is understandably wary. The wounds of John's loss are still raw and bleeding, and the idea of placing his trust in a Cardassian, even one claiming to be an ally, feels like a betrayal of his fallen friend's memory. But as Zek time and again risks his own life to funnel crucial intel to the rebels, Kalek begins to see past the color of the young spy's scales to the bravery in his heart. Slowly but surely, a bond of trust and respect forms between the two unlikely allies. Together, Kalek and Zek embark on a string of daring raids and sabotage missions, striking at the very heart of the Cardassian war machine. They infiltrate heavily guarded bases, slice through firewalls to steal top-secret data, and even manage to turn the enemy's own weapons against them, reprogramming automated defense turrets to mow down their Cardassian masters in hails of friendly fire. But their greatest test comes when Zek uncovers chilling news. A massive Cardassian battle fleet, gathering in a nearby system, poised to unleash a devastating assault on the rebel stronghold. The odds of stopping such a juggernaut seem insurmountable. If the rebel base falls, the flame of resistance will be snuffed out forever, and the Cardassian jackboot will stamp out the last embers of hope in the galaxy. Kalek and Zek hatch a desperate plan to infiltrate the Cardassian flagship and sabotage its weapon systems from within. It's a virtual suicide mission. If they're captured, the Cardassians will surely subject them to the most horrific tortures imaginable before granting them the mercy of a slow, agonizing death. And even if they succeed in crippling the flagship, they'll still be trapped on a ship swarming with enemy troops with no chance of escape. But for Kalek and Zek, there is no choice. Too much is at stake. They have to try. Stowing away aboard a Cardassian supply transport, they manage to slip aboard the flagship undetected. But almost immediately their luck runs out. A patrol of enemy soldiers stumbles upon them in a narrow access corridor. Kalek and Zek open fire, blaster bolts stitching up the walls as they cut down the first wave of Cardassians. But more troops flood into the passageway, forcing the rebels to give ground, trading shots from behind hastily improvised barricades of fallen bodies and twisted debris. Just as it seems they'll be overrun, a titanic explosion somewhere deep in the bowels of the ship throws everyone off their feet. Emergency klaxons blare as the deck bucks and shudders. Main power fails, plunging the corridor into darkness shot through with hellish red emergency lighting. In the confusion, Kalik risks a glance out of viewport, wondering if this is some kind of trick. Instead, his jaw drops at the incredible sight outside. Wave after wave of rebel ships pour out of hyperspace, hammering into the Cardassian fleet with a storm of missiles and laser fire. The Cardassians reel under the onslaught, their formation fracturing as rebel fighters strafe their hulls and blasted chunks of hull plate pinwheel away into the void. It's a miracle, an answered prayer, the cavalry riding to the rescue at the last possible instant. Kalik suddenly understands. Before they'd infiltrated the flagship, Zek had managed to get off a tight beam transmission to the rebel base, warning them of the impending attack. Command must have gathered every ship they could spare and launched a desperate counter-offensive. The battle still hangs in the balance, the outcome far from certain. But for the first time the rebels have a fighting chance. Heartened by this unexpected turn, Kalik and Zek redouble their efforts to fight through to the bridge. Galvanized by the sacrifice of their comrades outside, they hurl themselves at the defending Cardassians like men possessed. In the end, sheer grit and bloody-minded determination sees them through. They blast and hack their way onto the bridge, leaving a trail of mangled bodies in their wake. Only the captain still stands, a cruel, hawkish man with eyes as cold and merciless as an Arctic dawn. He levels his sidearm at Kalik's chest with a sneer of contempt. "Pathetic," he spits. "You really think a pack of ragtag malcontents like you can stand against the might of the Cardassian Union? We'll grind your precious rebellion to dust and bury your dreams of freedom in the rubble." Kalik's face is a mask of blood and soot, but his eyes blaze with the fire of unbreakable conviction. He raises his own weapon in hands that tremble with fatigue and the weight of too many lost friends. "No," he says, his voice low and hard as a ferro-steel blade. "This is where your empire's evil ends. This is where we start building a new future, a galaxy where your kind will never threaten anyone again." The Cardassian opens his mouth, perhaps to snarl some final defiance. But Kalik is already squeezing the trigger. The captain's skull bursts like a rotten melon, and he topples back in a spray of gore. With the Cardassian flagship destroyed and their fleet in disarray, the rebel ships seized their chance. Kalik and Zek led the charge as rebel troops flooded through the airlocks, storming the enemy vessels with guns blazing. The cramped corridors became killing grounds, stained with blood, and littered with bodies as the two sides clashed in brutal close-quarters combat. Kalik and his strike team fought like demons, cutting through the Cardassian ranks in sprays of shredded flesh and splintered bone. Zek moved among them like a ghost, his blade flashing silver as it found gap after gap in the enemy's armor. Slowly but inexorably, they pushed deeper into the Cardassian ships, leaving a trail of mangled corpses in their wake. But even as the battle raged, a sudden transmission crackled over Kalik's comms. The rebel command ship had picked up a distress signal from a human colony under Cardassian attack. Kalik's jaw clenched. He couldn't abandon those colonists to torture and death. But the rebel fleet was already stretched to its limit. They couldn't divert any more ships without risking the whole offensive. Kalik squeezed off a burst from his rifle, dropping a Cardassian soldier who'd popped out of cover. There was no choice. He barked orders, assembling a small team of his best fighters. Zek met his eyes and nodded, needing no words. Together, they peeled off from the main assault and blasted towards the stricken colony in a scream of engines. As their craft knifed through the planet's smoke-choked atmosphere, the scale of the destruction became sickeningly clear. Blackened craters pocked the landscape, where orbital bombardment had scoured away all trace of life. Twisted metal and jagged rubble stretched to the horizon, the scattered bones of shattered cities. Kalik and his team hit the ground hard, pulse rifles up and scanning for movement. In the ruins of the ravaged colony, they found only corpses, men, women, children, all cut down without mercy, their bodies left to rot where they'd fallen. The stench of death hung thick and cloying in the air. Then the shooting started. Crimson blaster bolts stitched the rubble around them as the Cardassian troops opened fire. Kalek and his rebels responded with a hail of fire, scything through the enemy soldiers as they charged from cover to cover. In the chaos and smoke, it was hard to tell how many Cardassians they faced, but Kalek pushed forward relentlessly, his blood pounding with the need for vengeance. As they battled deeper into the devastated colony, a horrifying reality became clear. They were too late. The Cardassians had already taken the surviving colonists prisoner. Even now, the captives were being herded aboard the enemy's transport ships, destined for the living hell of a labor camp. Zek flashed a feral grin, his eyes alight with the promise of destruction. With pleasure. He broke from cover and sprinted towards the Cardassian transports, hurling grenades and sowing mayhem. As the enemy turned to deal with Zek's surprise assault, Kalek and the others seized their chance. They blitzed across the killing ground and stormed up the transport ship's ramp. The Cardassian guards inside barely had time to raise their weapons before Kalek and his team cut them down in a storm of blaster fire. The colonists huddled in the darkened hold, their faces pale and haunted. Kalek tore off a guard's keycard and tossed it to the nearest prisoner. "Free the others," he ordered as he spun to cover the entrance. No sooner had the colonists begun to scramble out than a fresh wave of Cardassian soldiers surged up the ramp. They poured in fire, forcing Kalek and his men back. The air flashed blind white with energy bolts, and the deck plates grew slick with blood. Kalek snarled with effort as he held the line, buying time for the colonists to escape. But it wasn't enough. The Cardassians just kept coming, heedless of their losses. Kalek's team was being overwhelmed, pushed back step by brutal step. This was it, he realized with sudden, searing clarity. This was where they'd make their last stand. Then the whole world bucked and heaved as a massive explosion tore through the landing pad. The Cardassians staggered, their attack faltering. Kalek risked a glance out the hatch, and relief crashed through him at what he saw. Zek. The Cardassian stood atop the blazing ruin of the transport ships, wreathed in smoke and flame like some avenging angel. His armor was scorched and his face streaked with blood, but he was alive. And he'd done it. He'd bought them the time they needed. Kalek squeezed off one last burst, and then he was running, pounding down the ramp and across the corpse-strewn field to where their own transport waited. He all but dove through the hatch. "Punch it!" he bellowed. The engines roared, and then they were lifting off, clawing for the safety of space. Only once the blue arc of the planet's horizon fell away beneath them did Kalek allow himself to breathe. They'd done it. The colonists were safe. The mission was a success. Fate wasn't over. It was never over, and Kalek didn't know if it ever would be. All he knew was that he had to keep fighting, for John's memory, for Grek's sacrifice, for all the innocent lives shattered by Cardassian cruelty. No matter the cost, no matter how far he had to go or how much he had to bleed, he would make the Cardassians pay. He would see their foul empire torn down and ground into dust. That was his vow, his sacred, unbreakable oath, and he would keep it until the day death claimed him. The narrator continues the story. With the Cardassian fleet in ruins and their plans for galactic domination thwarted, the Rebel Alliance surged forth with renewed purpose. They clawed back system after system that had long languished under the Empire's iron fist, breaking the chains of countless worlds and igniting the flames of hope across the stars. At the vanguard of this crusade stood Kalek and Zek, their names now spoken in reverent whispers by the liberated masses. They were the heroes of the rebellion, the indomitable warriors who had struck the first devastating blow against the Cardassian juggernaut and shown the galaxy that the Empire was not invincible. But even as they basked in the adulation of those they had saved, Kalek and Zek knew their work was far from over. The Cardassians were a tenacious foe, and for every victory the rebels claimed, the Empire redoubled its efforts to crush the growing insurgency. Then came a stunning revelation from a deep-cover operative within the enemy's ranks. The Cardassians were developing a new weapon of unfathomable destructive power, a planet killer capable of snuffing out entire star systems with the push of a button. Kalek and Zek wasted no time. They volunteered to spearhead a daring strike into the heart of Cardassian space, to penetrate the Empire's most heavily fortified shipyards and destroy this abomination before it could be unleashed. They knew the odds of success were slim, and the chances of survival even slimmer, but the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. How could they refuse? As they fought their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Cardassian installation, Kalek and Zek found themselves face to face with a ghost from their past. General Antares, the sadistic butcher who had once tortured and mocked their fallen friend John Bennett. Antares leered at the rebels, spewing the same hateful vitriol he always had, assuring them that their pitiful uprising would soon be crushed beneath the Empire's heel. But Kalek was done listening to this snake's poison. He met Antares's smug arrogance with the icy certainty of a man who had already accepted his own death. "We will fight to the last breath and die free," he growled as he leveled his blaster. "But you and your kind will be a footnote in history, the price of cruelty and arrogance." And with that, Kalek sent a bolt through the sneering Cardassian skull. But there was no time to savor the righteous kill. All around them, the shipyards swarmed with enemy troops. Kalek and Zek had walked into a trap. They fought like men possessed, unleashing the skill and fury of all their long years of battle. But it wasn't enough. Not against these odds. The Cardassians just kept coming, an inexorable tide of armor and flesh. Then they were moving, all thought of retreat or surrender banished. They would meet their end as they had lived, as heroes, free and unbroken. Blaster bolts stitched the air and men screamed as Kalek and Zek charged into the teeth of the enemy guns. They fought with the strength of lions, their blood singing the glorious anthem of warriors unafraid. And as the killing shot struck home and their bodies crumpled to the cold metal deck, Kalek and Zek felt only peace. They had made a difference. Their sacrifice would galvanize the rebellion, inspire others to carry on the fight until the Cardassian Empire was ground to dust and the galaxy was free. So it was with smiles on their lips that these heroes drew their last breaths, secure in the knowledge that though their own tales had ended, the story of the rebellion would endure. And somewhere out there among the stars, a glorious new chapter was about to begin. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.